I'm Joe Angiulo, Exhibits Manager here on USS Hornet Sea, Air, and Space Museum. We're here today in our museum object storage looking at the ship's swords, specifically at this model of 1917 U.S. Navy Cutlass. The aircraft carrier has several swords in its collection, despite probably never actually having any issued in use during combat. The Cutlass is a relic of an earlier age of warfare. Modern sailors will be familiar with an earlier cutlass pattern, the 1860 pattern, which appears on the surface warfare badge. Officer's version has a stylized version of the officer's sword, but the enlisted version contains Navy cutlasses. The model of 1860, the Civil War pattern, which is the more familiar cutlass. But the word cutlass applies to any short, curved, single-edged, cut-oriented sword used on board a ship. In the same way that we refer to bathrooms as the head, kitchens as the galley, any short cutting sword used on board a ship is called a cutlass. In the 18th century, the word cutlass was used to describe a great number of non-nautical swords of the same basic form, but over the course of the 19th century, the word gets used exclusively for sailor swords. And that's when you hear the word cutlass today, you think of a sailor's sword like this. The earlier pattern was based on French designs. This World War I era model of 1917 pattern is based on a Dutch design. As a comparison, I have a modern replica from my own collection. So I think the Cold Steel, I don't remember what they sell this as, but this is really the Dutch pattern from the 1890s with the cutouts in the guard. This was also apparently adopted by the US Navy during World War II. It's very hard to find examples of that. Hornet's example is this model of 1917 version with the solid guard. Again, very similar to earlier Dutch patterns. It has a short, relatively heavy, curved, single-edged blade with a clipped Bowie knife style point, which serves a number of different functions. These were never particularly common, and they were assigned to ships. You often see them without scabbards like this. They would typically be on the walls around guns, especially on earlier sailing ships, but even through World War II, you'll see installations of them, often in fan patterns or sitting in barrels sometimes. They were part of the ship's equipment. They were not issued to a specific sailor. You would be assigned one as needed, typically for boarding parties or landing parties. And an aircraft carrier like Hornet, even prior to World War II, was not doing very many boarding or landing actions. So long before Hornet's service, the cutlass has been replaced by the pistol and the bayonet. It persists to this day as a ceremonial item, and there have been some really interesting modern iterations of the classic cutlass design. They wind up going back to the more iconic 1860 pattern. The 1917 pattern is a bit of a dead end developmentally. They're also a little bit mysterious in as much as these swords seem to have been manufactured by the Navy. Typically, officers' swords, such as this example, will be purchased by the individual officer, and they'll be made by companies like Ames, a lot of German companies, Spanish manufacturers more recently. So the fact that the Navy manufactured these, apparently, themselves in their own facilities means that they're a bit of an enigma. We don't have a lot of really good research data on them. The US model of 1917 Cutlass is a classic American Navy cutlass, short blade, single-edged, more or less consistent in its thickness from the base to the tip. It's got a single fuller, this groove, which is there to lighten the blade. It doesn't have anything to do with suction or blood flow, as you'll often hear. It has a clipped Bowie-style point, which facilitates thrusting and makes it easier to align the point with your thumb, typically, when you're thrusting. There's an asymmetrical sheet metal guard. These are designed for right-handers. I'm a lefty, myself, so this pattern does not have a lot of consideration for the left-handed sailor. But for a righty, it provides a lot of protection for the back of your hand. They are designed with ease of use and training in mind. The commonly held belief was that this sort of short slash-oriented sword was easier to use and more intuitive. A thrust-oriented sword, like the straight-bladed officer's version, was thought to require more training. There is some good evidence that bears this out. An untrained person given a sword will tend to execute some fairly straightforward downward slashes. This is true throughout the world. This is just how human beings are designed, how physiology functions. So in the event that there wasn't a lot of training done, this would ideally match your intuition better. There's also very good evidence that onboard environments like ships where there's rigging and doorways and walls, a shorter slashing weapon is less likely to get caught up in the overheads, in bulkheads, and especially in close-in melee conditions, having a blade that you wield closer to your body that doesn't require long, straight angles is going to be a lot more effective and a lot more pragmatic. So in conclusion, it seems as though cutlasses like this were still being issued on Navy warships through World War II. The orders removing them from service come after the end of the war. There's a number of anecdotal stories about World War II ships being issued these or throwing them overboard in some cases. There's definitely photographic evidence of these model 1917 cutlasses and their very similar Dutch counterpart appearing throughout the Pacific Theater, carried and used by both American servicemen and the Imperial Japanese Navy and Army, often as machetes, with the guards either cut off or cut down. A lot of them would also have been captured out of Dutch colonial stores in Indonesia and reused by the Japanese there. The blades on these are very, very durable and rugged. I do not know what kind of steel they used, but they are tough as nails. You can tell that this is an extremely hardy, durable weapon, which is well in fitting with the very concept of the sailor's cutlass. Thanks for joining us today for this video. If you like it, please share it with your friends, like, subscribe, and follow. We're always eager to hear suggestions for future topics we could explore, and thanks again for your time.